Alex White got a sequel, I was kind of skeptical because I thought the Cold Forge wasn't very good. It had its moments. Sometimes it was pretty funny when it wasn't supposed to be. But overall, it boiled down to it had one of the most despicable protagonists I've ever read in a book that you aren't supposed to think is despicable. Cringe dialogue, cringe politics, and overall, it reeked of 2018. That's just how it is. Or 2016, wherever it came out. It came out during, the height of the Trump administration, so people were upset. So, it kind of, at this point, feels dated. But, I was like, okay, Alex White has a second book, Into Chadrybdis. Mind you, in the grand scheme of this new Titan Books alien continuity, there's only 3 authors that have gone on to do more than one novel. We have, of course, Tim Leben, who did Out of the Shadows, and then got a whole trilogy that was an Alien vs. Predator trilogy. We have, of course, Alex White, and now we have Philippa Ballantine with Inferno's Fall and Seventh Circle, which I will be getting to those in the not too distant future. I was not ready for this book. This book is one of the most baffling things I've ever read, and quite frankly, it's terrible. I'm just going to throw it out there. And this is an unpopular opinion. Well, I'm not going to say it's completely unpopular. There's actually quite a few people that agree with me. But Alex White is considered one of the best alien authors ever. Ever. And I don't quite understand it. So, what is Into Chadrybdis about? It's about a group of United America citizens, which are basically United States citizens because this book's lazy and decided that the United Americas equals the United States of America. They aren't the same. The United States is in the United Americas, but, several hundred years in the future, that shouldn't even matter at this point. Really? We're still going to be doing the whole U.S. politics and, America's the worst thing? Well, they're going to an Iranian base that was bought from the UPP, Union of Progressive Peoples, which, for the sake of for simplicity's sake, is just the Soviet Union in space. Now, it's changed. This was an idea that was in William Gibson's Alien 3 script and has slowly become part of the overarching Alien continuity. So, the UPP is mentioned in this, but Iran has seceded from the UPP, much to the chagrin of the UPP, and they're kind of just not liked. Our main character in this for the first half of the book is Shy. Shy is a programmer, and overall, just not a very intelligent person, and if I'm being honest, she's a brat. She's just a brat of a human, but it's okay, because no one's particularly likable in this book. I didn't have a character I actually liked. To be quite honest, I'm not even going to name character names because they aren't important, and there are way too many characters in this book because this book is over 500 pages and it didn't need to be. So, Shy and her people show up, and they're it's an old married couple that runs the ship, and they're just dumb Texans. Because of course they are. We got our token drunk, abrasive lesbian character, We have the woman beater white guy that like has a thing for Shy and is kind of a bitch. He's the baby back bitch. We have our token black character that really he's like just there for diversity's sake and he doesn't do a whole lot. And I think it's a shame because he seemed like he had the potential to be a decent character, and Alex White just didn't feel like it. We've got uh, Iranian scientist man who is a nothing burger of a character. We got his two bosses, which I found them both to be assholes, but we're supposed to feel bad for the woman one. But she seems skeezy, and so I don't feel bad for her at all. And then, so they're there, and the Iranians discover a ship, and it has xenomorphs on it, and woman beater programmer calls the colonial marines, and all hell breaks loose after that. So spoilers, skip to this time code, because genuinely, for those of you who don't want spoilers for this book and you want to suffer like I did in abject shock for 2 days while reading this, then you I don't want you to be spoiled. So we have our second protagonist is a marine. He's a naive marine that is like caught up in the Corps, the USCM, and he just wants to serve his country and stuff. But his commanding officer, she is just evil for the sake of being evil and is just terrible. Unlike in the last book where the with the Cold Forge with the audit guy who was just hilariously evil because he was just everything that I think the author hates in a human being personified. She's just kind of evil. She's just evil. Um, she's no Major Spears from Nightmare Asylum. There is no complexity to her other than she's a Christian and she hunts xenomorphs and she's going to commit atrocities to get the job done. Because there's a whole war crimes subplot to this book. This book has like way too many subplots where the colonial marines uh, they round up the Iranians. They call them monsters. They kind of torture one of them. And they just commit war crimes because the colonial marines, for the sake of I hate America, which is what this author is clearly stating, are bad guys. But here's the problem with that. The colonial marines were not the United States Marines. They're two different entities. I mean, sure, they have similar like demeanors to them, but they were not the extension of Donald Trump. Because we've got to still suffer through that because this book is written in 2021. Even though Trump wasn't president during this time, there's just this hate towards the right-leaning people in this, and it's just like I look at this. I look at a book like this. You got to look. You got to understand my perspective here as someone who reviews books and has reviewed books for over a decade. We are suffering from a sort of being like progressive and the quote unquote woke. It's just overdone. Every IP book does this to some sort of extent. The difference is some of the time the author's like, okay, I have to do this, and you know that these publishers push this agenda. I know almost certainly that Titan Books pushes this agenda because every one of their books is like this now, where they have to push like the diversity quota, the where like everyone has to be a different race, everything has to be like left leaning, and ultimately, like, I don't care what people's politics are. I genuinely don't. What I care about is how a book is like instantly dated because of it. This book feels like it came out in 2021. And quite frankly, the politics and just an overall disdain for human beings in general. It's just like the theme of this book. It's one of the most bizarre things I've ever read. So before I get into like that, I want to get into like why we have two protagonists. Well, halfway through this book, it seems like Alex White wrote themselves into a corner and didn't know what to do, had introduced way too many characters, and this the solution was to pull a the Stand sort of deal and kill most of them within 2 chapters. I'm dead serious. Um, Shy is murdered, straight up murdered, and then most of the Iranians are murdered by xenomorphs within 2 chapters. It's genuinely shocking, but not in like a. It's like the Ryan Johnson subvert your expectations, but like even shittier than Ryan Johnson did it. It's done. It's a shock value thing for the sake of being shocking. All of the death, all of the crass, crude dialogue, which I get it. Alien and Aliens is full of crude language, but this is taken to an absolute extreme. I remember one Marine says, "You done hitting that leftist or like lefty snatch." Like what? Who talks that way? Who fucking talks that way? I don't get it. I really don't. It's just vulgar for the sake of being vulgar. Um, the good Marines are killed within a chapter, with the exception of the one. Then he's killed. Most of the cast is killed. By the time you're done, one character's gone missing. For some reason, Blue Marceau, the doctor, the worst protagonist ever put in a book, from the Cold Forge, she shows up and she is mutated into like a xenomorph thing, and she's trying to rescue people. I don't know why she's on Chadrybdis. I don't know why she's on Chadrybdis at all. Like, it doesn't really make any sense other than Alex White just wanted Blue there. Because wrote themselves into a hole again. It's downright one of the most shocking books because of how sloppy it is. There's just continuous, I write myself into a hole, and now I gotta write myself back out of it. And then I just do weird things. The interludes are okay in this. I will say that. There are interludes. They essentially, the way this is written, it's third person present tense, so I always expect interludes with that. That just seems to go hand in hand in most books that are written in this style. The interludes aren't bad, but like, I don't know why Blue is there, except for it's like a member berry. It's beyond a member berry. She's a main character, and she's there. We get a little bit of what happened to her between Cold Forge and this book, and it's not gone well for Blue. But I mean, like, I wasn't surprised. She's like the most abrasive human being that's ever existed until we got to this book, and then everyone's just about abrasive. I mean, the villain like has a tattoo of a Xeno cowering before a crucifix. our main Marine has a 1776 tattoo on his wrist, and like Shy like rolls her eyes at him. Um, everyone's just I got so frustrated about halfway through this book because no one would cooperate with one another. And it was like, because they wouldn't cooperate, things just kept going wrong for all of them, and people died. It's just a frustrating book. It's too long for one thing. I mean, I was genuinely worried about Alien's Phalanx, because that's actually slightly longer than this book, but you don't feel the length of it. It's just really well paced, and you care about the characters. In this, you don't care about anyone. And like, here's the thing: like, Alex White brings in a movie character, brings in the Asian doctor that shows up in Alien 3 that has a couple lines at the end of the film. He's in this, and he's hunting Blue. I don't know why they know about Blue, because this is the Blue plot line is like one of like 10,000 plot lines, and like it doesn't go anywhere. Like it doesn't it doesn't make sense. There's a whole thing with this planet that it's like old Wayland base that the UPP got, and now the Iranians have it, and then the colonial Marines want it for the United Americas, so they can all figure out like what's going on with it. Like, there's some Prometheus things that kind of happen near the end, with black goo, but like they don't really pan out to anything. You know, typical with like black goo, right? With like the films where it just doesn't. All it leads to is like some gross horror stuff. And in this, the horror is, it's just gross. It's not scary at all. There aren't, the only like moments that I thought were decent were some of the gunplay segments were better written than what I've read in a while. Probably my biggest issue with this book, like I said, is that the characters aren't likable. Most of them are petulant crybabies. The white male characters are either joke characters or they are punching bag characters. Our little colonial marine is everyone's verbal and sometimes physical punching bag. And like, we're supposed to think that that's acceptable, and like he hates himself, and like I don't like him as a character because like he becomes like a crybaby towards the end of the book, and like when he dies, it's like, okay, cool. Um, let's move on with our lives now. Like, but like Shy, half of Shy's problems are that she's like the queen of burning bridges, and like just making her life far harder than it needs to be. A lot of like pot calling the kettle black when it comes to characters. Like, no one's likable, but at the same time, you don't have to have a book where people are likable. But what you have to do is have interesting characters. None of these characters are interesting. This book is like a torture to read, if I'm being completely honest. So, overall, what would I rate Alien into Chadrybdis? I'd have to give it a point 8 out of 5. It isn't. I don't know if it is the worst Alien book I've ever read, because technically it is better than Alien Covenant Origins simply because it has xenomorphs in it, and that book didn't. And I have read Inferno's Fall. I have not reviewed it yet, but that in some ways is worse than this, even though it's more conventionally written. But yeah, I give it a point 0.8 stars out of 5. It's just not worth reading. It's one of these books where I was like, I never want to read this freaking thing again. And, I never want to read a book that Alex White writes ever again. And, you know, they could have good books that I like. I just don't want to even chance it at this point. And I'm so sick of modern, like 2010s and now early 2020s politics being in every fucking IP book. I'm so sick of it. Like, it's so tedious as a reviewer to read like rhetoric like this. Even if you believe in it, it's like, can we move on? Can we focus on actually having a good story, like a short, sweet, to the point story? And then you weave in a little bit of politics. We don't need your allusions to Guantanamo Bay and hate crimes in an alien book. We don't. And, like, ultimately, this book is left open to a sequel, which I think Colony War technically fills. I hope. I don't want to read a third Alex White alien book. So, anyway, have a nice day, everyone.